Hello, children. This is Miss Bhatia doing an EVS lesson during lockdown mode. I hope you've been enjoying your lesson of adaptation in plants. So far, we've studied about adaptation in terrestrial plants. Terrestrial plants are plants that grow on land. Today, we're going to talk about aquatic plants, that is, plants that grow in water. We're going to see adaptations in aquatic plants. Now, there are three kinds of aquatic plants. There are floating plants, fixed plants, and underwater plants. Floating plants, fixed plants, and underwater plants. All these grow in water, so they are called aquatic plants. I want you to take a moment and think what could be the difference between a floating plant, a fixed plant, and an underwater plant. Think. Have you seen plants in water, floating on water, inside water when you snorkel, scuba dive? Is there a difference between the weeds that you see or the lotus that you see on the water? Think. Okay, so I'm going to tell you about the difference between these three kinds of plants. Floating plants, as the name suggests, they do not have fixed roots. The roots do not go deep into the ground under the water and it does not attach itself to the ground. They just float. The roots hang loosely and the plant just floats on water. But in case of a fixed plant, the roots are fixed to the bottom of the water body, to the bottom of a pond or the bottom of a lake. They go right in and they fix themselves there. Now, in case of underwater plants, they are the ones that grow under the surface of the water. You will not see them above the surface. You can see them when you go snorkeling or scuba diving. You see plants with the corals. Those are underwater plants. Okay. In this presentation today, we're just going to talk about the first variety, that is the floating plants. So let's think. Have you seen a floating plant somewhere? What comes to your mind when I say floating plant? Well, if you thought of a lotus, I'm sorry, that's not correct, because a lotus is a fixed plant. I'm going to show you a picture of a floating plant here. This is a water hyacinth, a classic example of a floating plant. You see the pretty flower right here, and this is literally a carpet of water hyacinth on a pond. So these are floating plants. Now I want you to think again, what adaptations would be there in these floating plants. I'll show you one more picture before we start thinking. This is duckweed. Have you seen this kind of weed floating on a pond? This is duckweed up and close. This is another picture of duckweed. Think, how have these plants adapted? What kind of stems do they have? What kind of roots do they have? Put on your thinking cap. I'm going to give you a moment to think. Is the stem going to be hard, heavy, light, hollow? Think. What about the roots? I'm going to show you a picture now of the stem of the water hyacinth. Here, it's light and spongy. See the stem right here? Very, very light and spongy. And this helps it to float on the water. The roots, as we already saw, they were hanging loosely. They are not fixed. They hang loosely. So let's recap the two adaptations. In floating plants, the stems are light and spongy. These are the two keywords, light and spongy, to help it float on water. And they do not have fixed roots. The roots hang loosely in the water. Examples, water hyacinth and duckweed. I've got all these images from all these various websites. So thank you, children. We've studied about floating plants in this presentation today. Again, there are three kinds of aquatic plants: floating plants, fixed plants, and underwater plants. I'm going to do fixed plants in my next presentation. So till then, bye.